You ever get that feeling there's some hidden system running the world? You know, something that quietly steers the price of gas, global politics, even the money in your pocket, but most of us don't even know it's there? Well, you're not wrong. And today, we're going to pull back that curtain. So, what is this invisible force? It's not exactly the stock market, though it's kind of the backbone for it. And it's not just the big banks, even though they totally depend on it. It's this, well, brilliant financial setup that was born from a huge global crisis and a secret handshake deal that has basically defined the last 50 years of our history.
And the answer is the petrodollar. Yeah, a pretty simple name for an incredibly powerful, world-changing agreement that made the US dollar the undisputed king of global finance. Okay, let's really dive in and see how this whole thing was built.
Now, to really get your head around the petrodollar, we have to rewind the clock a bit. And what's so fascinating is that this story doesn't start with oil at all. Nope, it starts with gold and the world that was left behind after World War II.
Okay, so there are basically three key moments that set the stage for everything. First, you've got the Bretton Woods Conference, which created this whole new gold-backed world order. Then, bam, the Nixon shock happens and just rips up the rulebook. And finally, the OPEC oil crisis creates the perfect storm for a brand new system to rise up from all that chaos. So picture this. It's 1944. Much of the world's economy is just in ruins, but the United States is standing strong. At this big conference in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, global leaders make a deal. They all agree to peg their own currencies to the US dollar because America promised that every single one of those dollars could be traded in for a fixed amount of gold. And you know what? This actually created decades of stability.
But then, 1971 happened. In a move that absolutely stunned the world, President Nixon went on TV and announced that the US was slamming the gold window shut. Just like that. No more trading dollars for gold. This Nixon shock didn't just bend the rules. It shattered the whole system, and a huge wave of uncertainty washed over the entire globe. The dollar was suddenly flying without a safety net.
And that decision basically pushed the entire world into the age of fiat currency. Now, that's just a fancy term for money that isn't backed by something physical like gold. Its value is based completely on the trust people have in the government to print it. The dollar was still number one for sure, because the US economy was a powerhouse, but it had just lost its golden guarantee. So just 2 years after the dollar was set adrift, a brand new crisis explodes onto the scene. And this time it was all about energy. A massive oil shock threw the world into chaos, but it also, funny enough, created this once-in-a-generation opportunity for the U.S. to give the dollar a new, and maybe even stronger, anchor. So in 1973, because the U.S. supported Israel in the Yom Kippur War, Arab oil-producing nations in OPEC declared an embargo. They just turned off the tap. They stopped shipping oil to the United States and its allies. And the impact was immediate. It was devastating. We're talking massive gas shortages, crazy long lines at the pump, and just crippling inflation. And check this out. What's really wild is the sheer scale of the shock. I mean, the price of oil didn't just go up a little bit. It quadrupled in just a few months. And since our entire modern world runs on oil, from our cars to our factories, this wasn't just some inconvenience. It was a real threat to the whole global economic system.
And right out of the ashes of this crisis, a brilliant new plan was forged. A quiet, history-making agreement between the United States and the world's undisputed king of oil, Saudi Arabia. And this, right here, was the birth of the petrodollar system.
So the deal itself was deceptively simple, but its consequences were, well, they were profound. The U.S. guaranteed the military security of the Saudi kingdom, and in return, Saudi Arabia made one crucial promise. They would only accept U.S. dollars as payment for their oil. And because they were the biggest player in the market, the rest of OPEC quickly fell in line. And there it is! That's the whole ballgame. Overnight, every single country that needed to import oil, we're talking Germany, Japan, South Korea, you name it, they now had to get their hands on U.S. dollars to buy the energy to power their economies. The dollar wasn't backed by gold anymore. Now it was backed by oil. Now, this move wasn't just a clever short-term fix. It created this powerful, self-sustaining loop that has locked in the dollar's dominance for half a century. So let's break down how this power loop actually works. See, because every nation needs oil, there's this permanent artificial demand for U.S. currency. This automatically keeps the dollar strong. It also lets the U.S. government borrow money way cheaper than anyone else. And it gives the U.S. an incredibly powerful economic weapon, the ability to cut entire countries off from the global energy market just by using financial sanctions.
But hold on, what happens to the trillions of dollars that oil nations earn? They don't just stuff it in a vault. They have to put that money to work. And that brings us to the second and absolutely brilliant part of the system, something called petrodollar recycling.
And this just perfectly shows the genius of the whole cycle. Okay, so countries buy oil with dollars. Oil producers like Saudi Arabia and the UAE end up with these massive piles of dollars. What do? They recycle them by investing them right back into the US, buying government bonds, stocks, real estate. This basically finances US debt and boosts its economy, which only makes the dollars roll even stronger. It's a perfect feedback loop.
So for 5 decades, this system has been the unshakable foundation of the global economy. But the world is changing. And for the first time, we're starting to see some pretty serious cracks appear in the petrodollar's armor.
Which leads us to the critical question for our time. Why are major global players suddenly trying to build an off-ramp from a system they've used for 50 years? Well, the answer really boils down to one thing: a fundamental shift in geopolitical power. You've got this group of challengers, led by nations that are often at odds with U.S. foreign policy, especially members of the BRICS alliance. Russia and China are making more and more energy deals in their own currencies. It's a really clear attempt to protect their economies from U.S. sanctions and to build a financial system outside of Washington's control. But here's the catch. Knocking the dollar off its throne is incredibly difficult. Think of it like trying to get everyone to quit Twitter for a new app like Threads. The network effect is just so powerful. The dollar has insane liquidity. You can trade trillions without a problem. And the whole world's legal and contract system is built around it. To replace that, you'd have to rebuild the entire global financial plumbing from scratch. So what we're really seeing isn't some dramatic revolution. It's more of a slow, strategic diversification. Countries are building alternatives, they're cutting down their dollar use where it's politically sensitive, mostly to avoid sanctions. This isn't about flipping a switch overnight. It's about creating other options. And that leaves us with the ultimate question for the future of the global economy. Is the 50-year reign of the petrodollar headed for a sudden revolutionary collapse, or are we just watching the beginning of a long, slow fade into a more complex, multi-currency world?